You guys have talked to me about Andy a lot, but do you have a specific favorite story about Andy?
So you gotta get the book.
One that isn't in the book.
The first time I saw him was in 1965, leaving a concert. And as I say in the text, it was, he was from the future. And everybody there was in 1965, and he was in 1985 or whatever the fuck it was at that point. It was just kind of a profound moment.
What about you, Debbie? Anything?
I think the first time I saw Andy was on TV with Edie and maybe a couple others, and it was the best thing because here he was on TV.
He was David Susskind.
And he would barely say anything.
I saw him on David Susskind. Some of you will know what that was. And he was with Jackie and Candy and a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And Holly.
And so when you had your portrait done, Debbie, I was just actually curious, did he request, he just called you and was like, how does that work? When the Warhol people put your fucking phone off, turn it off. Who calls you and says we want to do your portrait?
It was kind of a mutual thing. I mean, that was a period where he was doing a lot of commission portraits for the, intelligentsia, rich girls, as it were.
But he requested you.
Yeah, I think it was kind of both ways.
Yeah. Mutual kind of, why not?
And then the deal is you get one and he then gets 5 or something? Do you remember how does it work?
He wasn't giving them away, Rob.
What?
He wasn't giving them away.
Yeah, but he gave you one. You get one. You didn't pay for that.
Actually, I did have to pay for it.
Yeah, we paid for it. It was like,
Really?
Yeah, it was
like,
cheap.
It was
Oh,
whatever,
it ain't anymore.
20 grand. I don't know.
It was a good investment.
I mean,
That's why, I could have bought all those fucking Marilyns and Elvises. And I just took it for granted as kind of a thing.
Well, we could, the story that has been told but is still my favorite cringe kind of story is the Basquiat story. So I think you need to tell that since we're filming tonight.
Yeah, well,
where is that one?
I knew John from hanging out, and we have a difference of opinion on how much I'm pretty sure was his first canvas, because he had been painting on cardboard. And I said, do a painting for me on canvas, and it was like this really rough, unstretched burlap type of canvas, brown stuff, and he knew I had an affinity for militaria, so it was like little stick figure army men shooting cannons at each other. And I gave him $200. She remembers it as $300. And then I later heard that he'd been telling people how much he had ripped me off for the 200 or $300. And then when we ran out of money, I sold it for 10 grand. But
it still gets me.
Yeah, I mean,
what year was that when you sold it?
He was still with us, early 80s.
Like the 80s?
Early 80s, yeah.
Yeah. Well, coulda, woulda, shoulda.
But what I've got is I've got the skull from the skull paintings.
Oh, yeah?
I used to have 4 skull paintings, but I also sold off. But I was broke. But I have the actual fucking skull.
And speaking of portraits and photographers of Mapplethorpe, this is actually my favorite portrait of you ever, for some reason. I mean, I love Mapplethorpe, but there's something about this one particularly that I love. You said he showed you what did you see?
We were in his loft, and he said, "You want to see my private stuff?" And he had this book of fucking like cocks with barbed wire and fucking all this horrendous shit. But I mean, it was nicely done. Good composition, what have you.
How many did you get through before you were like?
I never get there. I have no bottom, but.